Every politician and pundit could tell you that we live in a divided country. There is race, gender, sexual identity, evangelical or mainline, hybrid or pickup truck, diploma or no. When you see all of these divisions, you'd think that America is a land populated by aliens intent on causing social conflict, an actual episode of The Twilight Zone. My name is Elijah Emery, and I love America. I know, that's not an easy pill to swallow. I recognize its complications and its often troubled history, but I'm still simply patriotic. I want to see this country at its best. I'm going to talk to you today about reimagining the American heartland, and the first step in that process is finding out what you think it is right now. So I want you to picture what you think most people think the American heartland is. What are the people like? Do they pray? What type of music do they listen to? How do they vote? What's their race? What type of car do they drive? What's their gender? Where do they live? The New York Times asked readers the same question about a year ago, and a plurality of people who responded to the survey selected this map, which pictures the heartland as a geographic region based off the idea that, well, the heartland is the Midwest. Of course, this was selected by only 22% of readers. So I'm going to show you the next few options. There's this map, and this map.
Yeah.
I don't live in any of these heartlands. I'm not from the Midwest. I live just a few miles away from the coast, and I'm not a Trump supporter. Am I not a heartlander? The very word indicates importance. The heart, crux of the body, the heartland, crux of the nation. What makes a Pennsylvanian named James in Wilkes-Barre any different from a Pennsylvanian named James who lives in Philadelphia? Is the first James purer, more virtuous? No, or at least you can't tell based off of where he lives. You might be wondering which heartland I picked. I didn't choose a heartland. I don't know what it is, but I know it's not mappable. The only thing that I know about the heartland is that I want to be a part of it. Some of you know all too much about the heartland, you think. You heard Sarah Palin talk about real America, the snide contempt ringing her throat, the age-old parable replayed for laughs, the virtuous Westerner, pioneer who communes with the primal spirits of man, with Kit Carson, Barry Goldwater, versus his nemesis, the corpulent Eastern freak, Boss Tweed and Nelson Rockefeller. And to some of you, the heartland must seem like so transparent a lie, a transparent political tool, a way to divide and to conquer. But we shouldn't reject the heartland. It's an idea that, as Voltaire said, we would have to invent if it did not already exist, because it is so important to the folk image of our nation. Not the Wild West, but the block party, the barbecue, the cup of Morning Joe. Maybe the heartland is too important to reject, and we certainly need something to unite us. In 1865, Abraham Lincoln called on us to act with malice towards none, with charity for all. In 1963, Martin Luther King prayed for a future where the sons of former slaveholders and the sons of former slaves could sit down together at the table of brotherhood. And in 2004, at the speech that would launch his career, Barack Obama said, "There are no red states, there are no blue states, there is only the United States." But maybe these speakers are simply repeating the bipartisan lie that we turn to in times of distress. Maybe we really are divided. That's what the research indicates. In 1994, Pew Research began asking 10 questions about political values, on government regulations to benefits for the poor to racial discrimination. Then, the average gap between self-identified Democrats and Republicans on these questions was 15 points. Today it's 36 points, up from 33% in just 2014. This division is really bumming people out. This right here is a graph of how Americans feel about the direction of this country. The black squiggly line represents Americans who feel this country is headed in the right direction, And the red squiggly line represents Americans who feel that this country is headed in the wrong direction. The last time America broke even, 2009, when I was 8 years old. Once we had things that we could turn to forget about politics with. We had sports, religion, history. Now it's all politicized because our cultural war must eat everything. Football is politicized, college sports are politicized, history is politicized, religion is more political than politics. And so it's hard to feel good about the past, too. One thing I can say I love about America are its ideals. Equality of opportunity, freedom, justice before the law, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But for much of its history, America has failed in its pursuit of these ideals. American slavery was uniquely tied to race. It took incredibly intense efforts to pry loose the fist of segregation, and mass incarceration continues that tradition of racism today. During World War II, we locked hundreds of thousands of Japanese Americans in internment camps. Native Americans have been pushed into smaller and smaller, worse and worse reservations and are still some of the poorest Americans today. And this isn't a problem unique to just one part of America. Diverse, liberal New York City has some of the worst segregation in the country. So far I've talked about how divided we are, how unjust America could be. But I still love this country. And the first reason behind that is that I believe in the American people. I've been lucky enough to have traveled around this country quite a bit. I've gone to rodeos in Idaho City. It's as wild as it sounds. I've walked the streets of Selma, Alabama. I've gotten rained on in Seattle. And I live right nearby in Yonkers, New York. Great town. Every place I go in America, I talk to the people there. I try to find out what drives them, how they feel about this country, what they do for work. Some of those interactions have been better than others. In the lobby of a hotel in Montgomery, I talked to two men about sports and about their jobs. The men worked for public transit agencies, and they ranked the best and worst commuter rail systems in America. Amtrak was dead last. Amtrak. The men saw a side of the country that I'd never seen before. They looked at the things which physically connect us together in a way that I just didn't before I met them. And of course, not every interaction has been positive. When I was out west visiting my family, I spoke briefly with a man who wore a shirt that said, "I'm guilty of being white." I'm uncomfortable with the identity politics his shirt conveyed. I'm uncomfortable with the divisions attached to either the thought of feeling attacked for being white or of separating yourself from people of color. Yet, the man also wore an American flag hat. And that interaction taught me that even those people who are completely different from me, who see the world so differently from how I do, they want to love America just the same way I want to be able to. Second, I believe not only in the American people, but in the American promise. When I think about the problems with America's pursuit of its ideals, I also think about how much closer we've come to those ideals since the founding of our nation, and how much the heroes of the past have cared about America. It leaves me with no choice but to love it. I'm a privileged person. There are few systems which have been built to keep me down, to keep me from being my best. And I'm grateful for what America's given me. But people who don't have many of the same amazing opportunities I have, they still love this country for what it could be. Earlier this year, I went on a civil rights journey with my synagogue across Alabama and Georgia. On our third day in the South, we went to Selma. Selma was a world away from my home in Yonkers. Many of the buildings were in shambles, and I even noticed ivy growing off of some dilapidated houses. When I was there, I met a woman named Joanne Bland. That's her? That's me with my hair down? Joanne had been very active in the civil rights movement. As a child, she was one of the youngest people ever jailed as she fought for equality. She told us about the day when she and many of the other leaders of the movement had gathered, like John Lewis, for example, great guy, had gathered on the pavement of the playground of George Washington Carver Homes, a public housing project in Selma. The group sang songs and then came together for a final prayer. When they were done with the prayer, they began the long march from Selma to Montgomery to protest for the passage of the Voting Rights Act. Yet, when they crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, named for a founder of the Ku Klux Klan, they were viciously attacked. By dogs, by billy clubs, and by tear gas. Worse yet, they weren't being attacked by men dressed in white sheets. They were being attacked by police officers. Eventually, the march required the intervention of the federal government to continue. After the movement's success in securing the passage of the Voting Rights Act, Joanne continued to fight for what she believed in. She joined the US military. I also walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and as I crossed, the reason I am able to love this country became clear. It's because this is a country that we are able to change. Joanne fought for her own freedom and then signed up to fight for America because she believed in it, despite the fact that she'd seen the country at its worst, despite the fact that she'd seen it when it most failed in fulfilling its creed, it most failed in following its ideals. Yet she also saw the country at its best, as the nation reacted to the glaring differences between the professed values of equality and the evil truth of segregation. It's these ideals, more than anything, the ideals of freedom of thought, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, the defense of truth and an educated citizenry, the use of reason in determining what action our nation takes, the ideals that enable us to have a country where we believe that someone can start out from the bottom and come out on the top. The ideals that say that we are a nation of compassion, a nation where bad luck does not condemn you to a life of sorrows. In short, it's the ideal of a republic, shaped by the best people across this nation and vigorously maintained by protest and by that ultimate sacrament, the vote. It's these ideals, more than anything, that makes me think that we have a chance at overcoming gridlock and partisanship and building a better America, building a heartland for today, based not off of where you live, what you look like, or what language you speak, but instead based off of your willingness to follow these ideals. It's these ideals which can make that heartland the center of American identity in the way that no physical place can be. It's these ideals which can unite Americans from across the country and across the political spectrum with at least one thing in common: a shared heartland and a shared desire to make this country better. And if we can all vote, protest, and fight for these ideals, and listen to Americans who might vote or protest differently as they fight for these ideals, if we can remember the tremendous patriotism and tremendous courage of heroes like Joanne Bland against insurmountable odds, then maybe we can find an America worth loving. Thank you very much.